In our last study, we looked at the spiritual gifts that the Apostle Paul gives in verses 6 through 8 of Romans 12. There are three such lists of spiritual gifts that Paul gives in his letters. In Ephesians chapter 4, he gives what are called the ministry or office gifts of apostles, prophets, evangelists, and pastor teachers. In 1 Corinthians 12, he gives what are referred to as the manifestations of the Spirit. Things like tongues, interpretation, healings. In Romans 12, that's what we looked at in our last study, we have the motivational gifts, in that they're spiritual enablings or inclinations that shape the way people see and go about things. And Paul wraps all of that up in verse 9 by saying, "Let love be without hypocrisy." One of the first lessons that early believers learned was love is the bottom line. It's the chief virtue of the Christian life. In another letter that Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, he said, "Now abide faith, hope, love, these three. But the greatest of these is love." Love is the premier virtue and supreme ethic. So Paul begins with love and says that it must not be tainted by hypocrisy. It's an interesting word. It comes from Greek drama and the stage. It meant literally beneath the mask. Now, of course, in the ancient world, plays were live productions delivered in large theaters. People in the cheap seats were too far away from the stage to see the actors' faces. And so actors often wore masks with exaggerated features so that people in the back could see if someone was supposed to be happy or sad or innocent or sinister. To this day, the symbol for drama is two masks, one laughing, the other crying. In Greek, the actor was a hypocrite, meaning one who speaks from beneath a mask. Paul says that we're not to play act at love. We're not to fake it. It's not enough to give lip service to the primacy of love in the Christian life and faith. We need to actually live it. The word love here is agape. It describes a kind of love that seeks the best for the one loved without concern for itself. That is, what the giver of love will get out of it. Paul means we can't sit around and merely talk about love, about how it's our chief virtue. We have to show it. We have to do it. But this agape isn't without boundaries. It's shaped by truth. So, abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. The object of love is God and His people. If we genuinely love them, we'll loathe what harms and be stoked about what blesses. Think of evil as vice and what's good as virtue. While the world exalts vice and demeans virtue, we must go the opposite direction. So, Christian, be careful about drawing entertainment from that which is evil. No, I'm not saying throw out your TV and don't go to the movies. But hey, if that's what God tells you to do, then by all means. No, what I'm saying is be discerning about what you call good and allow yourself to be entertained by. Evil is real. So, realistic depictions of the world will represent evil. But when evil is used to titillate, entertain, and provide a vicarious thrill, watch out. Honestly, it's best to turn that stuff off. Most Christians wish that the Lord gave clearer direction and spoke to them more often. I would suggest that He does, but too often we dispute what He says. So be swift to comply to the Spirit's leading when watching TV or listening to the radio. Verse 10, be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love. Paul just piles up warm words describing family and friends as he speaks about how we're to treat one another. We're to be kind, affectionate even. Of course, being careful not to cross proper boundaries. And some of us grew up in, let's just call it what they were, messed up homes. Others were raised in foster care, bounced around the system. Maybe we don't have a good example of a healthy family. And yet we can imagine what one looks like. We know what our hearts yearn for. What we want is for people to be, kind to one another, to look out for each other, take care of one another. We want to be open and honest with one another and accept it as we are while we're growing in grace. Now, here's how this would look if it was fully in play in a local church. There'd be no greeters because people would show up early to welcome one another. There'd be no ushers because we'd make sure everyone had a seat. There'd be no calls for help in the nursery or the children's classes or the youth realm because people would be, looking for ways to be in an actual vital part of the church family. And there'd probably be a whole lot more hugging. We read on, in honor, giving preference to one another. How much of our time is spent waiting for others to recognize and affirm us? Let's turn that on its head and show that much attention to others. Verse 11, not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. The key here is that phrase and qualifier, serving the Lord. The first two phrases tell how to serve, that is with diligence and fervency, with purpose and passion. But not lagging in diligence is literally not slothful in earnestness. The sloth is perpetually lazy. They have no interest in anything. They're bored. You know, a bored believer is really an oxymoron, isn't it? There's work to be done in expanding the kingdom of God. There's proverbial dragons to slay. There's battles to fight. There's souls to win. There's lives to be saved. Wild, exciting adventures to embark on. That Greek word fervent means to be hot to the point of boiling. It's a passion word. We ought to be passionate, hot for the things of God. Verse 12, rejoicing in hope. Hope is that quality of faith that has confidence in God to bring us safely home. It's a rock-solid assurance that it's all going to work out and heaven is our sure destiny. That hope instills a deep joy in our present. The first time I read Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, I was filled with apprehension because I didn't know how the story ended, and there were times when Frodo and Sam faced ordeals that seemed way beyond their capacity to endure. Now, the second and third time that I read them, I didn't have the same concern because I knew the end. Now I was rooting them on because I knew what was coming. Christian, we know our end. It's all good. It's eternal, indescribable glory. So let's root each other on while we're in the midst of our story. He goes on, patient in tribulation. Now, since faith tells us that all things work together for good, we can patiently endure difficulty. Nothing can come into our lives that doesn't first have to pass through the hands of God, and He only allows it to work some greater good. So we patiently endure, looking to Him for the way through, not just any old way out. Knowing that it's the way through that's a means by which God molds and shapes us to better participate in the glory that is to be ours. Continuing steadfastly in prayer. Prayer reminds us of our dependence on God, the core of our virtue and strength. Verse 13, distributing to the needs of the saints. Charity, this is being sensitive to the practical needs of other believers, is evidence of being saved. Here again, Paul picks words that make his intent clear. It's literally entering into a mutual sharing of the needs of the saints. Don't regard charity as benevolence from those who have to those who don't. We don't hand our gift down. No, we come alongside to share ourselves. We identify with the needy and see their need as our own because we are one in Christ. He goes on, given to hospitality. Hospitality, that's a practical concern for the welfare of those within one's reach. It's using our resources to help others. And throughout history, hospitality or its lack, they've been seen as the evidence of a culture's grip on virtue. Now, I want to riff for a bit on virtue because it's in short supply today, yet it's front and center in the Christian life and ethic. Today, for many, the word virtue means pure, chaste, virginal. It carries the sense of innocence. Not the innocence of freedom from guilt, but more in the sense of inexperience, of being naive and unsophisticated. As Christians, we eschew being worldly. Well, for unbelievers, worldly means savvy and smart, experienced. In church, if someone's called worldly, it's an insult. In a bar, that's a compliment. It's only in the last 100 years or so that virtue has had such an unfortunate come down. The word comes to us from the Latin virtus, which means strength, moral strength, and excellence. The classical understanding of virtus was something that was highly prized. Its opposite was vice, a weakness of character. Virtus was the chief goal, the mark of genuine success in a life well lived. Philosophy and science combined to one end, to produce a life that was good because it was virtuous. Philosophers spent hours debating what virtue was and how to attain it. They made lists of virtues, describing what they looked like. And eventually they settled on 4 virtues: justice, courage, wisdom, and moderation. During the Middle Ages, that list was expanded to include the spiritual virtues of faith, hope, and love. These 7 became the core of the age of chivalry, when the pursuit of virtue was enshrined as the goal of all culture and civilization. For the classical and medieval world, virtue wasn't seen as a single act, rather it was an entire character, a habit of moral excellence. Historically, as civilization rises, virtue is prized. What leads to its demise is when virtue is replaced by vice. A simple way to see whether virtue or vice prevails is to look at a society's heroes, those honored as examples. A few generations ago, our heroes were people of virtue, of sterling moral excellence. George Washington, John Quincy Adams, Patrick Henry, Abraham Lincoln, Florence Nightingale, Abigail Adams, Louisa May Alcott, Clara Barton. Now, for sure, their lives and stories were often mythologized, but the point is they were portrayed as heroic, as virtuous role models to aspire to. But a revolution in thinking called the Enlightenment, after a long battle with Christianity, gained the upper hand in Western civilization. Faith in God was rooted out and swept away, and with it went belief in real, objective, unchanging truth. Truth was reduced to whatever the majority decided. And then it devolved to whatever an individual wanted it to be. Today, truth is whatever works for whoever. Virtue, that which is good because it aligns with truth, is now an old-fashioned, silly idea because there isn't any objective truth in our postmodern age. Good is whatever works. Hey, it's all good. Anything goes as long as it's good for you. Vice is today's virtue because it gets people what they want. Popular media and culture all largely celebrate vice. For proof, look no further than who comprise today's heroes: athletes, entertainers, celebrities whose achievement is nothing but fame itself. They sing, they act, they dribble a ball. Countless are those who aspire to be just like them, not in character, but in fame, in finance, in form. People want desperately to do what their heroes do: slam dunk, play a guitar, sing, walk a runway in some hideous getup called fashion. Hit TV shows have been The Voice, American Idol, Top Model, Project Runway, The Biggest Loser. About the only time you even hear the word hero anymore is in Superhero, a comic book cartoon character. Who today says, I want to be like so-and-so because they're just so kind and generous and wise and courageous and good and loving? 100 years ago, when 4th graders were asked who they wanted to be like, they said Abraham Lincoln, George Washington. Today, it's some pop singer, a rap artist, or athlete. As followers of Jesus, we're called to moral excellence, to virtue, to the very things that we find here in verses 9 through 13.